Hi, this is Arianna Huffington, and these are the books of my life.
It's not all that often you get to interview a genuine global superstar. But I think those terms apply absolutely to Arianna Huffington. And inevitably, trying to condense her achievements into a single soundbite is certainly a bit of a challenge. She's the former editor-in-chief of the Huffington Post, for a start. She's written 15 books. In 2016, she founded Thrive Global, which is a platform designed to limit stress in the workplace. And of course, she's been included on Time magazine's list of the world's 100 most influential people and the Forbes most powerful women list. See, even the stingiest highlights reel goes on a bit. In this episode of Books of My Life, we discussed why Arianna owes so much to the writings of Marcus Aurelius and talked about which books have had the greatest impact on her family. It's a fascinating insight into the mind of one of the most powerful women alive today. And apologies for all the background noise. I was speaking to Arianna at the World Government Summit in Dubai, which is not a quiet place. Before we get to any of that, though, just a very quick shout out to say, do please subscribe to the Books of My Life podcast. We'd love to have you with us every week, and we have some great guests coming up. Oh, and send us your own choices to booksofmylife@thenational.ae. Okay, here's Arianna Huffington on the Books of My Life. I started by asking whether it mattered to her to be included on these big lists of influential people.
You know, I'm very focused on what I'm doing now, having left the Huffington Post 2 years ago to launch Thrive Global, to help people live less stressful and burned out lives. So I'm very focused on that. It's such a huge goal. And the lists are just an indication of the fact that people are resonating to what I'm trying to do.
So it's more about what you're doing rather than the personal brand, if you like.
Definitely.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know. So before you were sort of focusing on well-being and reducing stress in the workplace, and when you were at the height of your, I suppose, flat-out work schedule, did you ever have a chance to read?
Oh, yes. Reading has been a passion of mine ever since I was a little girl.
Okay.
My mother tells the story of how on my 5th birthday, I threw out all the little girls who had come to my birthday party because they were interrupting my reading.
Tell me what you're reading at 5 years old.
Who knows what I was reading in Greek, because I was born in Athens. But then when I left Greece and went to Cambridge to study economics, I organized a debate around the changing role of women at the Cambridge Union. I had been elected president of the union, and one of the things the president does is picks a topic for the presidential debate. And a publisher reached out to me and invited me to write a book. And I wrote back and I said, thank you so much, but I can't write. And they wrote back and said, can you have lunch? And I had lunch, and that was led to a contract to write my first book, and I was 23. I discovered I could write, and have since done 15 books. So I remember reading a lot of novels, and I loved all the Russians, Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, and the fact that they address the big questions of what is life about and how can we live a good life. But they did it in a way which was not preachy and didactic, but storytelling. And I had to learn as a writer to become a storyteller. My second book was very dry. It was a book on political leadership, which I think just sold 2,000 copies.
Okay.
was not at all successful. But it was after that, when I wrote my first biography, that I sort of learned how to tell a story.
Okay. God, crikey, what age were you when you were reading Tolstoy and Dostoevsky?
Well, I think I was like a teenager. Teenagers would read these books.
Yeah.
In fact, they are part of a lot of school curricula.
God, I was obviously way behind the schedule in that case.
But remember, I was a bookworm.
Yeah.
You were probably having a much more interesting life than I was as a teenager. I was in a very bookish environment. We didn't have any money. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment, but we read a lot.
Yeah.
My mother was self-taught. She never went to college. But she read and passed books on to us and underlined them. I'm a big underliner.
Tell me some names that she passed on to you. I'd love to hear.
Well, she actually was also very big into philosophy.
Okay.
And, the Greeks, Plato and Aristotle, for us, they were not like big, intimidating names of philosophers. They were people who taught you how to live life. I mean, like Socrates' dictum, the unexamined life is not worth living, or know thyself. All these things were like part of what I was taught in the books I read, in the conversations around the kitchen table.
And tell me, when you moved to Cambridge, did you find reading was quite a reassuring presence in your life? I mean, it must have been quite strange making such a big move.
It was incredibly strange,
Yeah.
going from a very, very loving and close Greek family to Girton College, Cambridge, which was a very Gothic building where I had to feed them the heater in my bedroom with shillings.
No way.
And had to walk 5 minutes to the bathroom in this interminable cold corridors. Yeah, it was very hard, and books definitely were always a solace. And I read a lot of English writers, including old English writers. I remember like Benjamin Disraeli, who was prime minister, but also wrote this amazing book, Sibyl, a novel, about how the theme of the book was really about how changes had to happen in the way England worked, in the way it treated its working classes. But it was done in the form of a novel to capture people's imagination, and it sort of remained one of my favorite books.
Okay, so Disraeli. And what else were you reading while you were at Cambridge? Can you remember?
So I definitely read what has become my absolute favorite book on leadership,
Oh, this is good.
which is called Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. So Marcus Aurelius, as you know, was a Roman emperor,
Yes, of course.
but he was also a Stoic philosopher. And so what was wonderful, and what I think is just a great lesson for all of us, is that he was very much in the arena. He fought wars, he dealt with plagues and betrayals and everything that can happen. But at the same time, he was a philosopher. So he would go to bed and write about how do you live a life where you are not perpetually thrown off balance by what life brings you. How are you able to stay in the eye of the hurricane? I love the sort of concept of being in the eye of the hurricane, because it really means that no matter what's going on around you, what turmoil is going on, you can remain centered. And from that place, you can make better decisions and deal with problems in a more effective way.
I noticed that a lot of what you've mentioned so far, either some of the Russian novelists or some of the classical philosophers, it's all quite heavy stuff. Do you have time to read anything sort of as light relief as well, or not really?
I actually love children's books.
Okay.
And, I love mythology and like starting with Aesop's fables.
Amazing, yeah.
Which are all like fables about life, the tortoise and the hare.
Yeah, of course.
And I think they're worth. I still read them because they are not just for children. Obviously, I read them to my children when they were young. I love Dr. Seuss's books too.
Okay, that's interesting.
Because
did your children enjoy those as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They love Dr. Seuss.
Okay.
And it's kind of amazing how they have withstood the test of time.
Sorry, at this point the background noise all became a bit much, but to paraphrase, without the sound of aeroplanes overhead and birds in the rafters, I asked Arianna what book she wishes she could give to her younger self.
Meditations by Marcus Aurelius has had the biggest influence on me. It's still on my nightstand,
Yeah.
heavily underlined. I wish I had read it even younger. And it's actually the book that I've given to friends as a gift more
Okay.
often than any other book. So at the moment, I'm reading a book by Yuval. He first wrote a book called *Sapiens*,
And now, is it Humankind?
and now
the new
he
one?
wrote a book called *Homo Deus*.
Amadeus.
Yes, and it's kind of a wonderful book about our times, but also about how we got here. And what I love about him is that he's obviously this intellectual who writes these amazing books, but he takes 2 months a year to go and do a silent retreat, a silent meditation retreat.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you do a lot of that?
I have never done a meditation retreat, certainly not a silent one, but I do meditate every day.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk a bit about that. So since the pace of your life has changed and you've really focused on well-being and trying to prevent burnout in people in the workplace, has that freed you up to read more? I mean, has that been a side effect
because
of it?
that's not actually what the emphasis of what we're doing is. The emphasis is not on slowing down; it's on doing your life more effectively.
Which presumably does free up more time, though.
It actually frees up more time, first of all, to sleep.
Okay.
Because sleep is foundational. And we now have the science to prove it. And that's why I wrote an entire book on that, The Sleep Revolution, to show people the latest science of how when we get enough sleep, we are able to run on all cylinders and actually do things faster. So you're right, it does free up time. And that time is definitely spent for me working out as well as reading. I love to read just before I go to sleep, but only physical books because I don't have any screens by my bed.
Okay. So no Kindles lying around the house.
No, I mean, I have a Kindle running for when I'm traveling, but it's just wonderful to have a tactile, physical object to underline in bed.
Yeah. I'm amazed that you've still got the energy to read books like Amadeus before you go to bed. That's kind of a mad way to shut down.
Well, because it puts everything in perspective. That's what I like. That's the great thing about philosophy or poetry, that they make you realize that whatever you are dealing with is not as overwhelming as you may have thought it was.
So someone who struggles to sleep a lot, how much sleep were you getting when you were editor-in-chief of Huffington Post, and how much sleep do you get now?
Well, I collapsed from exhaustion 2 years into building the Huffington Post. So that's when all my habits changed.
Yeah.
And as you know, the latest science shows that most of us need somewhere between 7 and 9 hours. What we need exactly varies. Between 7 and 9 hours, unless you have a genetic mutation and you can get away with 4. But only 1.5% of the population has that mutation. So for me, I found that when I started getting 7 to 8 hours at the Huffington Post, which was for 9 years of my leadership there, I was so much more effective. I could get things done faster, make better decisions. So it's not a trade-off between sleep and performance. Sleep improves performance, and athletes show that.
And did you notice that almost instantaneously once you started sleeping?
Yes. Even before you get your full amount of sleep that you need, you begin to notice the difference.
Okay. Sorry, we've gone way off topic there, but it's very interesting to hear about it. And as you know, people who don't sleep very much like talking about nothing more than how little they sleep.
Well, also because when you're sleep deprived, also you don't enjoy life as much,
course,
I find, because you still can do things,
Yeah.
but it becomes more transactional.
Let's get back to some books, Arianna Huffington. What was the last book that made you cry? Can you remember?
Oh, I cry so much.
We'll have a list of them then.
I cry so much when I read books, even like silly books, or as we discussed, children's books. Like, it doesn't have to be some profound revelation.
No, for sure.
It's just any kind of sign of humanity. I don't remember what was the last book I cried on, but it happens a lot.
Okay. And it sounds like you're quite a prolific reader. Is there a book that you've tried to finish many times and never been able to quite get through? I know a lot of people obviously bring up James Joyce at this point. Have you managed to get through Ulysses?
Yeah, I did read Ulysses when I lived in England.
That's impressive. How did you find it?
I loved it. He's just such an amazing character. In a way, he's kind of a bit of a stoic philosopher because he has this kind of pretty mundane existence, but gets through it and finds meaning in it. I think it's kind of an amazing metaphor for how we approach our life affects dramatically.
Anyway, I didn't let you answer the first question, which was, is there a book that you haven't finished? I'd love to hear it, if so.
Oh, definitely. I remember actually when I was at Cambridge, I was reading a book by Myrdal called Asian Drama, and which was interminable, unbelievably long. And we used to have tutorials. I don't know if they still have them, but so I went to have my tutorial with my tutor. And he said to me, so how much of the book have you read? And I said, all of it, lying. and he said to me, oh, really? Because I don't think the author has read all of it. He was, so that was like a real put down.
Quite a relief, I imagine.
But I will never forget it.
And what about other fiction that you haven't been able to get through? I mean, the list for me is endless. I mean, I don't know if it's the same in your house, but I have sort of half opened, half read books all over the place, which I never go back to. Are you quite determined to get through stuff?
Well, not if it's like a book like Alexander Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago, or, big books like that. I mean, I sometimes just kind of go into it. Or often books written by friends that I feel I have to at least know what they've written.
You know what I'm going to ask, don't you?
No, don't ask. But I cannot claim that I read it from beginning to end. But I read. I call it reading into it.
Okay, that sounds reasonable. And you talked about giving away Marcus Aurelius to a lot of friends. Is there a book that you've loaned out and never seen again? That seems to be quite a perennial problem for people.
Oh, I don't loan my books.
Oh, you don't? Oh, wow.
No,
okay.
because my books are all underlined. I'm incapable of reading without underlining. So they're precious because of my underlinings, because then you can go back to a book and very quickly capture the key points that most impressed you. It's not like you can loan it and if you never get it, you buy another one.
It's your very unique copy, right?
It's my very unique copy.
Yeah, and presumably also, your own sort of scrawlings, for want of a better word. I'm sure they're not scrawlings, but notes and underlinings in the book are quite exposing in some way. It's quite revealing to how you feel about it, and actually talking about how you feel about a book can be quite an intimate thing to do. Because you may not want to share that information.
Yeah, no, I don't mind that so much because I'm fine about sharing it. It's more, I don't want to lose it.
So I've been really struck by a number of the things that you mentioned have referred back to this idea of Stoicism. And to me that, and perhaps I'm wrong, and I'm sure you'll correct me if I am, but that seems to be slightly at odds with the idea of well-being within a workplace where it's sort of, being stoic and sort of grinding on through is not quite actually what you're now advocating.
Stoicism is not about grinding through. Stoicism is more like the Serenity Prayer of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know if you know that, which is basically about knowing the difference between things we can change and things we cannot. And when dealing with things we cannot change, bringing grace into it. So having an attitude of acceptance. And when there are things that we can change, working very hard to change them. So I think it's that distinction that Stoicism teaches us, and it dramatically transforms the way we live our lives.
I know we haven't got long, so I'm gonna ask you the final question, which we like to ask all of our guests. You're going away for a year, and you can only take 3 books with you. What are they going to be? And they can't be ones that you already mentioned so far, I'm afraid.
Oh, no. One of them at least has to be
Okay.
Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
Okay, you can help. Yeah, Marcus Aurelius, you can help.
Okay. Well, the other one would be Shakespeare. I would take The Tempest, which is my favorite Shakespeare play, which I still don't fully understand. So I feel if I'm on a desert island, I'll have an opportunity to read it many, many times.
Good
And
setting for it as well.
a good setting, yes, a good setting for it, especially if it's a remote island.
Exactly.
And hopefully understand. And then I would really like to take a children's book
Okay.
because I'd like to be able to sort of reconnect with that childlike wonder about life. And I'm trying to think of what I would take, since I cannot take Aesop or Dr. Seuss, since we already talked about it. I think I might take Goodnight Moon.
Okay, I don't know that. Can you tell
You
me?
don't know that?
No.
So Goodnight Moon is a book that practically every parent has read to their children.
Okay.
It's a book that helps them disconnect with the outside world and surrender to sleep. So it's a really good lesson for adults too, because the truth is that we carry our daily activities with us when we get into bed, and that's why it's so hard to unwind and
Of
be
course,
able to
switch
sleep.
off. Gosh, I clearly need to have a word with my parents because I've never heard of it and I can't sleep. So there's obviously
okay,
there's
you
obviously a
got to get
connection there.
Good Night Moon, but also I did a parody of it, which is on Audible. You can download it, called Good Night Smartphone,
Okay.
which is for adults.
Okay. That sounds excellent. Arianna Huffington, those were the books of your life. Thank you so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. That was Books of My Life, a new podcast from The National. I really hope it will inspire you to, as Arianna said, put your phone down and pick up a book for a few minutes or possibly even more every day.
Thank you.